Hello, hello. Welcome back to Reclaiming the Last 10 podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. Today, we are going to be talking about anti-racist weight loss. And I have been preparing and so ready to talk about this because it is such an important conversation that we need to be having. All right, here's what we're going to get into in this episode. Like I said, we're diving into anti-racist weight loss. What does it mean? What does that really mean? And why does it matter if you want to experience actual freedom from the weight struggle? If you want to experience actual freedom in your relationship with weight and food. But before that, I do want to make this super clear what this episode isn't for and what this episode isn't about. I am not here to convince anyone that racism exists or that it is a problem. So for anyone that is a racism denier of any sort, honestly, you're probably not going to love learning from me, and I'm probably not the teacher for you, just keeping it 100. Or maybe I am, and maybe you do want to understand this, but I won't be doing any convincing. So you will have to do that part for yourself. But here's what I will be doing in this episode. Okay. So you already know that racism exists, and you already know that it's a problem. You know this, but just like most of us, you've never been shown or taught or even considered, okay, how does this come into play as it relates to my relationship with food, as it relates to my relationship with my body? How does this come into play? And how is this a part of me feeling like I'm constantly battling with my body, me feeling like I'm constantly at war with my body, why weight feels like such a struggle, why I self-sabotage, why I feel not enough, etc., and all of that. And I want to say, I truly believe that everybody benefits from anti-racism and from anti-racist approaches. Because racism doesn't only hurt people of color. I mean, obviously, this will affect women of color in different ways and at varying degrees, of course. But no matter your background, I do recommend that you listen to this episode, to the entirety of this episode. For me, when I was able to understand this piece, what we are unpacking today and diving deep into today, when I was able to understand this piece and how it was affecting me, my journey, my relationship with my body, my feelings of not enough, it really changed my entire experience around this. In case that you are new to the podcast, or maybe you've been listening for a long time and you just need a little reminder, I battled with my weight for almost 2 decades. For almost 2 decades of this area of my life that had to do with food, with emotional eating, with sabotage, with constantly struggling and battling with my weight, that was 2 decades of my life. At one point, I weighed almost 200 pounds, which for me did not feel good for my body. Did not feel good for my body. I literally struggled to tie my shoes. My body was in literal pain. Every time that I attempted to lose weight, the only way that I knew how was through methods of restriction and deprivation, and I hated every minute of it. I also hated my body through every minute of it. And every single weight loss attempt during that time literally felt like a mission to fix myself. It was so emotional. And it was most certainly the biggest pain point was this area of my life. And it was my biggest frustration for sure. And so I would try to lose weight, and I would lose weight. I would lose 20 pounds, 30 pounds, 40 pounds, again, using these methods that I hated every minute. I hated every minute of it, and most certainly was not loving. And of course, not surprisingly, then there would be sabotage, self-sabotage, there would be emotional eating, and I would then gain weight and then repeat and repeat and repeat. And it was exhausting, physically exhausting, emotionally exhausting in every single way. And so what does any of this have to do with racism? What does any of what I just described have to do with racism? That's exactly what I'm unpacking today, because it has everything to do with how we're taught to feel about our bodies. And one last thing before I really get into the meat of this episode. This episode is part of a series. I want to make sure that you know that. If you haven't heard the episodes on feminist weight loss or holistic weight loss, I really encourage you to go listen to both of those episodes first, because by design, I'm always thinking about really supporting your journey. Listening to those two episodes first will really help to understand all of what we're unpacking here today so much better, so much more clear. All right, let's get into it. So racism is a part of this country here in the United States and just part of the world. As we're getting into this, as we're unpacking this, I'm going to briefly mention some really powerful, just very clear examples of this. By no means is this a complete history, but I think it's important to bring in some very real context. All right. So I want you to think back to the founding of the United States. Slavery is a part of our history. And I'm based in the United States, so I'm going to be using some examples, a couple of examples that are part of our history here in the United States, but there are examples worldwide. So slavery is part of our history. And as you know, based solely on the color of skin, one group of people, Black Americans, were treated as property, as slaves, utilized for labor, for free labor, extracted for labor, however you want to call that. There was physical abuse and so much more. And as I mentioned, this isn't going to be a complete history, debriefing of history, but I think it's important in this conversation to bring in some very real, clear context of the systems we are calling out that not only allow for these kinds of things to happen, but are designed for this, to support this, to hold this, and keep this going. So all of that, while another group of people, again, based solely on the color of skin, race, extracted monetary value, were able to gain generational wealth, builds generational wealth, benefited from this arrangement. That is a very simplified couple of sentences, an example of racism and racism as a system. Because racism isn't just individual prejudice or hateful slurs. I mean, those, of course, are part of it, but it is a system. It's a structure of power that benefits white people at the expense of people of color. And it shows up in our institutions, our beauty standards, our healthcare, our education, and yes, even our relationships with our own bodies. Racism is woven into the rules, the assumptions, our default ideas. And unless it's actively changed, it continues to quietly operate by design. We're going to talk about that more as we continue to unpack things. And so racism, it's a operating system that the world was built on. And unless we name it and rewrite that and change it and update it, this keeps running in the background. And we're going to get into this. We're going to talk about this even more. How does that show up in our relationship with our own bodies? And I promise you, it does show up. You're going to see that so clear in just a few minutes. So this idea of, hey, this one skin color, this one race is better, is superior, is more deserving of certain kinds of treatment or rights, and then this other skin color or race isn't. That's one way to also put it simply. Another example, again, using the United States history here, drawing from our history. If you've never heard this piece of information before, this fact here, it may blow your mind. Honestly, for me, it makes me sick to my stomach to even think about this. But before, quote unquote, the discovery of America, there were already so many brilliant indigenous communities inhabiting all of America, North America, Central America, South America. But before that, there was an estimated 10 million indigenous people that lived in North America alone. So that's not even including Central or South America. By the early 1900s, so after, quote unquote, the discovery of America, that number dropped. That number of indigenous people living in North America dropped to less than 300,000. And so again, think about racism and white supremacy here. Who has the right to land? Who has human rights based on race and skin color? This was literally the murder and genocide of communities communities of color, people of color, indigenous people, through massacre and warfare, forced removals, the deliberate spread of disease, starvation, destruction of food systems, cultural erasure. And here's why this matters. I mean, it matters for a lot of reasons, but it's really important. I'm using examples from our history, but this is not ancient history. This is ongoing. Racism is a system that is alive and well. It isn't something that is in our past. It's evolved into more modern systems, prisons, poverty. If we bring it right to this very moment, I'm recording this episode in the summer of 2025, kidnappings without due process, aka being called deportations, and so much more. And obviously, this is all horrifying. Like I said, it makes me sick to my stomach just to think about it. But okay, what does all this have to do with weight loss and ending this struggle with weight and food and ending this eternal battle that feels like we're having with our bodies? Just like in the feminist weight loss episode, I said very clearly, this isn't about shaming or blaming men. It's about naming a system and calling it out. In the feminist weight loss episode, we named a system. We called out patriarchy. We named the system. We call it out. It's not to shame and blame. It is to empower. We name the system. We call it out. And recognizing that diet culture, and in the feminist weight loss episode, we were able to connect the dots, recognizing that diet culture is one of patriarchy's most effective tools. In that same exact way, we're calling out racism and white supremacy. We're naming the system, we're calling it out. In that same exact way, the purpose is not to shame and blame any group of people. At least that is not my goal. And that is not the purpose for my work or this episode. But it is to clearly call out the system that is the problem. And it's to clearly call out that weight loss and diet culture has served as a weapon, has been weaponized against women of color. And here's how weight loss and diet culture have been weaponized, have been an effective tool and weaponized against women of color. They've been used to enforce white, Eurocentric beauty standards as the standard, as what is valuable, what is beautiful, what is acceptable, what is quote unquote enough, turning anything outside of that into quote unquote problems to fix. Another way to say this is that thinness has been labeled and used as the standard for what is valuable, what is beautiful, what is attractive, what is success, what is having it all together, and also deemed what is closest to whiteness or has a proximity to whiteness is another way to say it. And I'm going to say what I just said in a little bit of a different way to again answer the question of how has weight loss and diet culture been weaponized against women of color and been used as an effective tool of white supremacy and racism. Weight loss and diet culture have been weaponized against women of color with this demand, essentially, of shedding, for example, curves, softness, anything outside of the Eurocentric standard, where then we treat our bodies like battlegrounds, where thinness, which has that proximity to whiteness, is the thing to strive for. From that lens, to become thinner is equated with this almost like becoming more palatable. It's assimilation, or at least it can be. It doesn't always have to be. And we are going to talk about that as well, because there's nuance here. And there's always power. I find there's always power in the nuance, because obviously, if we start generalizing everything for everyone, I have never found that to be very empowering either. And so, of course, there's an aspect about thinness that is about the aesthetics, like what your body looks like and your body size. But I also want to invite you to consider this with me for a moment, that when we talk about thinness and the way we've been socialized, it's even more than just the aesthetics or the body size. Yes, it's been this standard for beauty, but also like I said, for value, for success, for, hey, she really has things together. She's really, knows what she's doing in life, or even morality. This is why not thin feels not enough, because not only is thinness about aesthetics and beauty and physical body size, but it's really been so deeply woven in with if someone is disciplined or not, or successful or not. And so then we're really going to take this deep. So then we're not even just talking about body size anymore. We're talking about belonging in a system, and belonging in systems that were never built for us, not as women and not as a person of color. And by the way, I'm talking about women in this episode, but I also want to name that anyone socialized as female or living in a marginalized body, we feel the crushing weight of these standards and these systems and these boxes that we're supposed to, quote unquote, fit into, that are deemed as the standard. And so if this is you in any way, shape, or form, I see you. And this is why we're calling it out, because it is not good for anyone. It is not good for anyone. Because in a system where whiteness and anything that has proximity to whiteness, when we're deeming that as the most valuable thing, as being what's valuable, as being what's deserving, as being what's beautiful, then that means that any aspects of whiteness, or what's deemed as that, quote unquote, anything that fits in that box, that means that unless you are all of those things and you fit in that box exactly, then you're not valuable, deserving, or beautiful. I mean, you are. Obviously, you are. That's why we're talking about all of this. But that's what we've been taught to believe. That's the socialization around it. And so if there's a lie here that we've believed, that I most certainly believed, and it wasn't helpful at all, if there's a lie here that we've believed, is the lie of white supremacy. And that lie most certainly comes up in our relationship to our bodies, in our relationship with food. And so what I want to do now is I want to make this real and personal. As you know, I am a proud Latina. I am a woman of color. I am a daughter of immigrants. My parents immigrated to the United States from Mexico. And so I am first generation Mexican American here in the United States. And I remember growing up with messages, sometimes explicit, sometimes not so explicit, that white is the most beautiful. White skin, blonde hair, blue eyes, light colored eyes, and thin is beautiful, especially back then. I mean, I'm 43 years old now, so think about, I guess, three-ish decades ago. Oh my gosh, the lack of diversity on television, in magazines. I think things are a lot more, there's a lot more representation now. And I think that's a good thing. But back then, it really was like all the lead roles, even in cartoons or the covers of magazines. And guess what? I couldn't change my skin color, but my weight. That felt like the one thing I could control, at least to some degree, to try to be closer to the standard of what was beautiful and valuable and acceptable, so that I could feel enough, so that I can feel beautiful and good and confident. And so that became my focus, to quote unquote fix the thing that I could. But of course, it all kept backfiring because, as I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, there was so much sabotage. I felt inadequate the entire time. There was so much internalized racism, and internalized racism is a problem. That's a big reason of why we have to talk about this. And so there was so much internalized racism, which means I had internalized the ideas of white supremacy and what white supremacy teaches the world. Here's what's more valuable. Here's what's superior. And here's what isn't. Here's what isn't valuable. Here's what isn't superior. Here's the people we can treat like animals, or who don't deserve to have as many rights. I'm being blunt. All of those ideas that white supremacy teaches us, I had believed and then internalized them against myself, except I wasn't aware of it then. I wasn't aware of the internalized racism. I just thought all that shit was normal, and I just thought all of it was true. As I mentioned earlier, it wasn't an effective approach. And now in hindsight, I'm like, oh, thank God it wasn't effective, because I'm so glad I didn't stay stuck believing all of those things about myself. So thankful for that now in hindsight, because every single weight loss attempt literally felt like a mission to fix myself and was fueled by feelings of inadequacy and fear and worry and not enoughness and urgency, so much urgency. Because as long as I wasn't thin, then I wasn't valuable, then I wasn't acceptable, then I wasn't okay. As long as I wasn't thin, I felt flawed, unworthy, inadequate. And I, again, had believed everything that white supremacy taught me. And I wasn't thinking in my head, oh, these are the things that white supremacy has taught me. They just all felt like things that were true, and I believed them about myself. That's what internalized bias means, in this case, specifically internalized racism. And check this out, because let's take this even another layer here, another layer deep. If as a woman, let's see how this benefits the system, okay? If as a woman, I am focused on this one thing, focusing all of my energy, all of my waking hours and brain space and genius on losing weight, guess what? That is by design. It's like white supremacy and patriarchy handed us this ridiculous Rubik's Cube so that we will be entertained in the corner and we won't have energy or the emotional bandwidth or the mental bandwidth to focus on anything else that matters to us. Most certainly not showing up powerfully in the world with all our genius and all our brilliance, because we're so busy with that ridiculous, Rubik's Cube they handed us to keep us busy, when it was all a lie and we don't need to fix ourselves anyways. And I do want to take a real quick moment to say, I promise you, I'm not going to be the one to tell you, hey, you're not allowed to have a weight loss goal. Of course you can. And I'm here to support you in that, but we need to uncover the bullshit. We need to uncover the systems that have created so much pain, because of course there's nuance here. And let's actually shine a light on that nuance now. As a Latina, as a woman of color, as I was in the middle of battling with my weight and just feeling so torn and so confused and so frustrated, like, why is this so hard for me? I'm such a hard worker. I'm smart. Like, I was the first person in my family to go to college and go get my master's degree. And as the oldest daughter of immigrants, oh my gosh, like, if anyone listening right now, if you are the oldest daughter of immigrants, there's like memes about this. It is a thing. That usually at like the age of 7, you're already like translating for your parents at their doctor's appointments. Like, it was so frustrating because I knew I'm so smart. Like, damn, I know how to get shit done. I'm so hardworking. I'm a badass. Like, I am a badass. But this area of my life felt so frustrating. And I hadn't realized how much this internalized racism was fucking shit up. That's why I'm here to talk about it now in this very clear way. Okay, but here's what I was going to say. There's nuance here. There's nuance. As a Latina, as a woman of color, I had also noticed that especially in a lot of spaces that were women of color, that were Latina or feminists, a lot of those spaces were anti-weight loss. Like, hey, just love yourself, love your body as it is, etc. Which, listen, let me tell you, I'll be the very first to say this. Let me say this very clear. I get it. I get it. I completely understand where that's coming from. I freaking get it. I struggled with eating disorders myself. And I know firsthand that diet culture has created so much unnecessary suffering for women. All kinds of women all over the world, too much suffering. So I get it. I understand where this is coming from. And that's why that's what we're doing here today. We are naming the systems. We are naming diet culture. We are naming that just like diet culture is one of patriarchy's most effective tools, it is also a very effective tool of white supremacy and racism, and particularly for so many of us, it shows up as internalized racism. When we then take these beliefs and ideas and turn that inward against ourselves, and then we start to believe the lie about ourselves that we are not beautiful, we are not valuable. We become the upholder of those lies in our own minds. But here's the nuance. There's nuance in so much of this, but here's the thing I want to specifically name. For myself, even as a woman of color, and I would see the love your body, very anti-weight loss messages, and those didn't feel right either. Those didn't feel like medicine for me either, because I knew that there was so much emotional eating that I was doing. There was so much overeating that I was doing that did not feel good. I knew there was so many habits that I wanted to change. I knew there was so much of this eating that I was doing that wasn't loving and that didn't feel good for my physical body. I knew I had enough awareness to know that definitely a lot of my eating and sabotage was very emotionally intense. And I knew, at least on some level, that I needed other ways to process emotions. I knew that I was doing a lot of emotional eating and it did not feel good. And so anti-weight loss didn't feel right for me either, because it felt like there was something more. Because I did want to feel good in my body. I wanted to feel good in my body physically. And so here's how things changed. I became aware of all of that internalized racism, all the bullshit ideas I had learned about myself, about my body, about that had me feeling not enough or like my body needed to be fixed. I became aware of that and how it created so much self-doubt and self-sabotage. As you can see, so much of what I'm describing is diet culture. And as I started to weed out all of those lies that I had believed, all of the socialization that wasn't helpful, that was creating harm, that was feeding so much of what these patterns and these loops that weren't working for me, that didn't feel good for me or my body or my emotional self-care. As I started to weed all of that out, I then started to change the way that I took care of myself. I then was able to make decisions around food that felt different, that felt loving, that came from a place of knowing how effing worthy that I am, how deserving and valuable that I am, period. As I started weeding out all of this white supremacy, racism, patriarchy, diet culture, you see how we're now putting it together with feminist weight loss. As I started weeding all of that out, it's all problematic. It's all creating stuckness and self-sabotage and self-hatred and feeling not enough and emotional eating and feeling disconnected from our bodies and blah, 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 blah. And it goes on and on and on. I was then able to make different decisions around food and feel really confident and really trust myself, no matter where I went, no matter what food was around, from this place of knowing how worthy my body is and how deserving and valuable my body is, that I am a queen. And if queen sounds too corny for you, sub in whatever. Sub in whatever word resonates for you. But being able to see this, being able to see that the approach was garbage, that the not enoughness was a garbage and probably poison, and to ditch that and to weed that out and to instead insert love and connection, body connection and deservingness, and see myself as valuable, my decisions shifted. And that's how then habits changed in a way that was lasting. I mean, at this point, I lost a total of 80 pounds. But that was well over a decade ago. And I say this all the time, weight is not a struggle. In fact, I love this area of my life. But the way to weight loss not being a struggle wasn't from a path of not enough. And I'm going to fix myself and weight loss is going to be the way I fix myself or that I become worthy. So it's why I'm really taking my time and why I'm so honestly, I am delighted, honored, thrilled to be putting this content out into the world. And please share this episode with a friend. Please share it on social media. Please share, leave us a review. This is medicine that we as women need so that we can actually heal this area of our lives and have it feel different and get unstuck and feel free of this weight struggle. So my approach, my self-care, my decisions that had to do with food, I was then able to change those in a way that was lasting and loving. But I had to change my approach. My decisions had to shift. They had to come from a completely different lens, a lens of seeing myself as enough, not from the lens of racism or white supremacy that told me that who I am is not valuable, that told me that who I am is not enough. If you imagine that those lenses were like a pair of glasses, once I realized that, it's like I grabbed those glasses and like effing threw them as far as I possibly could. And instead, seeing myself and approaching any change I want to make, whether I wanted to lose 5 pounds or 50 pounds or however much, or change a certain habit in my daily routine, or change the reasons why I eat. All of that change in a way that was lasting and loving and empowering and powerful came from a lens of seeing myself and who I am and my body as enough, not from the lens of believing the lie of white supremacy that I am unworthy as I am and that I need to be as close to quote unquote white as possible in order to be worthy. Nope. So fully claiming my worth and my value without anyone's permission. You don't need anyone's permission. Really hear me on this. You do not need anyone's permission to claim your worth and your value and to really step proudly into that. And then from there, create whatever change you want, you desire, knowing you are deserving and valuable. And so the more and more that I did that, weed out the bullshit, the garbage, the poison, the lies, claim my worth and my value more and more and more, the more connected that I felt with my body, the more beautiful that my body became to me, the more that what I chose to eat or not eat, or what time I went to bed, or how many hours I work, all of those decisions just felt more and more like a sacred honoring of myself and my body. Can you hear the difference? A sacred honoring of myself and my body. So when my decisions changed from the core, that's when the transformation was lasting, but more importantly, loving. And that actually made my life better, not more restricted and deprived and miserable. When my decisions changed from the core, at the core, then my transformation, it felt more powerful. I felt more powerful each day, every day, waking up knowing fully deep in my bones, I know I am deserving and valuable, period. I don't need anyone to co-sign that. I just claim it. And so this very interesting, fascinating, beautiful thing happened that even if my body, like I said, I lost a total of 80 pounds and that has been, I just now am able to enjoy taking care of myself in this ways with ease and joy and love. I don't even like to call it maintenance because that's very diet culture language. Even if my body physically weighs less, because as I said, I did lose a total of 80 pounds, but really my body weighs what feels good. I actually take up more space. I mean, just go and check out my Instagram if you're on there. You can see I use my voice for activism, for human rights, for anything that I think that, for anything that I decide that I want to use my voice for, that I want to stand for. And I'm able to do this because there's this shift. There's this palpable shift that I know I just am worthy and valuable. That required weeding out white supremacy and racism and being able to look at that, call it out, address it. So there's this deep, deep love. There's this deep, deep self-honoring. And that's where my decisions come from. That's where my food decisions come from. That's where body decisions come from. That's where life decisions come from. This is what anti-racist weight loss means. There's also a couple other things that for me, racist weight loss means, especially as a woman of color, I think it's really saying like, hey, my healing can't happen in spaces that dehumanize me. What do I mean by that? For a long, long time, and I do still think this is true in wellness spaces and empowerment spaces and personal development spaces, like my mind is blown in this day and age that we are living in with so much racial violence happening in broad daylight that we can see in videos day after day, just out there. It is mind-boggling to me, but also not surprising, but very disappointing that there are spaces and quote unquote thought leaders that won't even mention, that won't even touch this stuff with a 10-foot pole. And so for me, I've really decided, and I'm just sharing this on a very personal note for anyone that it might find it helpful and valuable. I've decided, hey, if there is a space that can't even acknowledge this might be part of my human experience, my healing cannot happen in that space. Personal choice. I feel really good about that. Another thing that anti-racist weight loss, I think, means is that if your approach ignores racism, then it's not for everyone. And I'll say one more thing about this. True empowerment, if we're talking about true empowerment and freedom, true empowerment requires liberation. Especially if we're talking about freedom, and I'm always talking about freedom from the weight struggle. If we're talking about true food freedom, then we need to name all these things that keep us from being or feeling free. And for so many of us in this series, we've addressed patriarchy, we've addressed racism, white supremacy, and those aren't the only ones, right? We've addressed diet culture, which is a tool of those things, but those are some big ones. And I'm so honored to be talking about this and addressing it because it matters so much. So honestly, we could go into more detail. We could go into more context, more history, like, for example, the racist origins of the BMI. Did you know? The BMI, body mass index, created by a Belgian mathematician based only on white European men. Did you know that? Just a little tidbit of information there. Or, for example, how Black, brown, and indigenous women are so much more likely, and this is statistically speaking, to be pathologized, ignored, or misdiagnosed due to a lot of racism in our medical systems that treat certain bodies as problem bodies. Or, for example, how diet culture is a multi-billion-dollar industry, and like all oppressive systems, it profits off of our pain and insecurity. So, of course, the system needs us to keep feeling broken and to stay stuck in that and to be the ones upholding those ideas, almost doing the work for them. And I don't say that so that you can blame yourself. That is most certainly not the point. I say that because I know for me and for so many of the amazing women that I work with, it's such a vital piece to see, to notice when you're the one upholding that a certain idea in your mind that really isn't supportive of you, isn't supporting you, isn't taking you where you want to go, isn't creating, what you want to create or experience. And when we can create awareness around that, we can release it. We can throw it in the freaking garbage. And by the way, quick mention here, I just mentioned that diet culture is a multi-billion-dollar industry. And I just want to mention here, I think this example really shows how racism, patriarchy, and capitalism really intersect in diet culture, and that trifecta is powerful. And now we are naming it. We are naming it. So we've talked about a lot, and I just gave more examples. Honestly, we could keep bringing in examples and going more in depth, but I do think what we have unpacked here together today really captures the heart of what matters most here. I do want to mention 3 more things before I wrap up this episode. I mentioned earlier that I think everyone benefits from things being anti-racist. And I think it's pretty clear how women of color benefit from an anti-weight loss approach. in the way that I just laid everything out. But I also want to mention this. If you are a white woman that is listening and you're low-key wondering, how exactly does this apply for me? And by the way, do not feel bad for asking that question. We can answer it. It's an important question that we can acknowledge and answer. Here's the simplest analogy that I can think of to really powerfully explain this. I want you to imagine that there's a box, just like a square cardboard box. And some old straight white dude, hundreds or thousands of years ago, put a bunch of things into that box and just decided and just deemed all of the things in this box are white and therefore valuable. Then there's things in that box like thinness. Thinness is one of those things. Just throw it in the box. Everything in the box, that's just what we categorize as whiteness, as superior, as valuable. Just throw a bunch of things in the box. I promise you that no matter your background or the color of your skin, you have felt the pressure, the not enoughness, just as an individual of anything that has to do with who you are that doesn't fit in that box. So for example, let's use weight loss. It's actually a really great example here. Thinness is one of the things in that box, the white box of what's valuable and superior, etc. And if you ever are not feeling thin, you don't feel enough. And that's why I say, when we are able to name the system and call it out and how it affects all of us, that also benefits all of us. And what I have observed in my now decade of doing this work with women from all walks of life, literally from all around the world, all kinds of backgrounds, what I've observed, and by the way, I've been doing this work for over a decade, but in my own life, I've been doing this work for decades. So it's like the formal experience and the lived experience. But what I've observed is that anytime there's any sort of box, and anytime we're saying, hey, you have to fit perfectly in this box in order to be worthy, that shit doesn't benefit anyone, because usually we don't fit perfectly into that box. And I think what's so powerful about the way we're talking about this is like, screw the box. Honestly, who decided what goes in the box? By the way, in the next episode of the series, we're going to be talking about decolonized weight loss. Ooh, get ready. That's also going to be so powerful. And we'll be talking about this even more. If anytime you are catching any sort of whiff of trying to shove yourself in a box and it doesn't feel good, and it feels like you have to shove yourself into that box in order to feel worthy, it's probably patriarchy. It's probably white supremacy or a combination of those or something similar, something along those lines. In fact, even within communities of color, and also, I definitely know this from lived experience, the closer you are to whiteness, whether that's lighter skin or a thinner body or Eurocentric features, the more quote unquote desirable or quote unquote worthy that you are treated. That is how deep this runs. But I do feel empowered knowing that we are able to empower ourselves with this awareness and fight back against it and free ourselves from it on an individual level and as a collective, because the reach of white supremacy doesn't stop at borders. It doesn't stop here in the United States or any other specific country. It's global, it's generational, and it seeps into all kinds of communities, families, and cultures. Another thing I want to mention, let's talk about the word anti-racist here for a minute. And I'm just going to go ahead and say that most weight loss programs, methods are racist, even if they don't mean to be. And that's because they aren't doing the work of being anti-racist. You may already know this because I've mentioned it in other podcast episodes, but I literally have taken the last 4 years. In the past 4 years, I've been doing this work at the deepest level, including fully updating my curriculum. My clients know this. I have been dedicated to this work, including fully updating the last 10 curriculum. I've updated even the structures of my courses and program. I've updated even the payment options of my courses and program, the last 10, to proactively be anti-racist. In fact, the work of anti-racism is ongoing. It's ongoing. But certainly, I have had a commitment to combating the effects of racism, white supremacy, which, as we've talked about today, we've really unpacked today, shows up in even what might feel like unexpected places, like body image, self-love, self-care, self-doubt, self-sabotage. And we are living in a time where there is, in broad daylight, racial violence happening on our streets, in our communities. In this very moment, as I mentioned, I'm recording this episode in summer of 2025. There is so much racial violence that I never thought I would see this in my lifetime, specifically in Brown and immigrant communities, also against DEI and other marginalized communities. But I'm just going to go ahead and say this. You may love this next thing I'm going to say. You may hate it, but it's true. Neutral in this moment is not anti-racist. And if we want for the healing in this world to be for everyone, if we want for healing in this world to be for everyone, it needs to be anti-racist. And I want healing to be for everyone, not just for some. I want healing to be for everyone, all women, not just for some. Which actually brings me to the next thing, the very last thing that I want to address before I wrap up this episode. I want to take a moment to share my vision with you. For anyone listening, if you're a new listener, maybe you just found my work, maybe you've been listening for, years, regardless of the color of your skin, although obviously that plays a role in our experience because of everything we've been talking about today. I want to share with you the vision that I have for the community that we are creating here together. What I see is a community of women that are allies. So, for example, I am not a Black woman. I don't personally have or know that specific lived experience, but holy hell, I deeply honored the sacred, important healing work that Black women do in their own unique lived experience. Because obviously, not every woman is the same. Every woman is different. Another example, I am not an immigrant woman from India or the Philippines, but holy hell, I deeply honor the sacred, important healing work that each woman does in her own life based on her own lived experience for herself, for her family, for her community. And I could list example after example because as women, we are each completely unique. And that is something to be honored, to be recognized and respected, most certainly not ignored. And again, most weight loss approaches, programs, meal plans, etc., they don't go anywhere near this stuff. And yet it matters so much. You already know this, especially if you've gotten this far into this episode, you already know this. It's never been calories in, calories out. What the hell? Come on. We're so smart as women. It's never been calories in, calories out, especially if your relationship with food or your weight has felt like a struggle for decades. It's never been just calories in, calories out. You are a whole human with a whole human experience. And so again, I'm sharing the vision with you, the community that we are building, that I've built. It's one for your own individual healing, empowerment, and freedom, and also a community where we care about collective healing, empowerment, and freedom. For me, that really feels like I honor my own experience, healing, empowerment, and freedom. And I honor your experience, healing, empowerment, and freedom. So I think that is a perfect place to wrap up this episode. Thank you for staying with me on this one through the end. This is revolutionary. Please share this episode. If you absolutely loved what you heard here today, we'd love if you take a minute leave us a 5-star review, and share this episode on your favorite social media platform. Let's help women around the world reclaim their power, ditch outdated, oppressive diet rules, and stop feeling endlessly at war with their bodies. This is about so much more than weight loss. It's about liberation. So please help me spread the word and the freedom. And you can do that by leaving a 5-star review wherever it is that you listen to your podcasts and sharing this episode on your favorite social media platform. And if you're like, oh my gosh, yes, this is exactly what I've been looking for. This is exactly what I've been wanting and needing. I invite you to come and join me inside of my coaching community, The Last 10. This is my 6-month signature coaching program where you get to work with me directly. I am in your corner supporting you. You also get lifetime access to all of the comprehensive curriculum and lessons. And right now, inside of The Last 10, we're creating powerful transformation during our summer of freedom. You'll get support to lose weight that doesn't feel good for your body, on your body. You'll get tools to break free from emotional eating and sabotage, and coaching to heal from the systems that made you feel not enough in the first place. Join today and you get instant access. You could be on a call with me this week experiencing breakthrough this week. Come and join me. Come and join us, our brilliant community of women who really want something different for themselves and just know that they've always deserved something better. I cannot wait to meet you. Just go to brendalamelli.com. You can go and get started there. And I'll talk to you very soon.